Well, good morning, you guys. Crystal here from Homemaking on the Homestead, and welcome to my channel. And in today's video, I am going to show you 7 frugal meals that I made utilizing my pantry and freezer. This is part of my pantry freezer challenge that I've been doing since the year started. So these 7 meals actually fed us for 12 different nights. And in total, I used 3 pounds of boneless, skinless chicken breasts and thigh mix and 3 pounds of hamburger cooked up. I hope these meals can inspire you and give you some great ideas on how to stretch your food and use up things in your pantry. I have to say that most of these recipes are not something that I actually had written down. These are just, after you cook from scratch for long enough, you pretty much get the idea of the things that you can just put together in amounts. I just want to show you what I put together and how I made that 6 pounds of meat stretch out over 12 different meals for us. All right then, let's get started on these meals. I started with 3 pounds of chicken thighs and breast meat, and I was going to cook that up in my Instant Pot. I added some water and some spices and put that on for about 10 minutes to cook. While that was cooking, I peeled up 2 sweet potatoes that I had in my pantry and chopped those into bite-sized pieces. I knew it would be a little while before I used it, so I just put it all into a bowl and then covered it in water just so that it could sit and wait until I needed it. I also chopped up an onion, and when the chicken was done, I did a quick release of the pressure and I took all of the meat out. And that is what I had. I then strained out the broth that was in there because I am going to use that in this soup. Now it was time to cook up my 1 cup of black beans. So I threw that into my Instant Pot with 3 cups of water and a teaspoon of salt. And I set that for 1 hour to cook. I divided the meat into 3 parts, and for the first one I chopped up about 2 cups. I'm going to use that tonight. And then what I had left, I took part of that and I shredded that because that will be used for a different meal, and I put it into a container. Now if you're not going to make the meal right away, you can certainly just put these containers of chicken into the freezer and have them ready to go. And the last third of that meat I chopped up into small pieces, and once again I put that into a container and put it in the freezer. While my beans were cooking, I decided to get some dinner rolls going. So I just did a quick, easy dinner roll recipe. I will try to have that one linked below. And I just wanted to get that first rise going with those because these were going to be served with this soup tonight. I also heated up my soup pot and threw in that chopped onion and let that start softening up while my dinner rolls were rising. Once they were soft, I added in the chicken broth. I added in a little bit of salsa because I was given this kind of a spicy bite, and I put in my sweet potatoes and the beans. I also added at that point my 2 cups of chicken that I had set aside, and I spiced it up a little bit more. You can use whatever spices that you like. While the soup was simmering so that the sweet potatoes would get soft, it was time to move on to the next step with my dinner rolls. This recipe made 16 dinner rolls, so I'm just cutting them all out right now my dough out into 16 pieces and rolling out those dinner rolls. While those dinner rolls were rising, I also made a salad to go with our meal, and once the dinner rolls came out of the oven, it was time to serve up this dinner. And it was absolutely delicious. We really enjoyed this, and we ate on this for 2 nights, plus had some lunch with it as well. Since I already had the chicken all shredded and ready to go, this was super easy to put together. I cut up a few of the leftover dinner rolls that we had and then just took some barbecue sauce and added that onto my chicken, stirred it in, and just kept adding until I just felt like I had the right consistency. Once I had that done, then it was pretty easy. I just started putting the chicken onto each bottom half of those dinner rolls. I added a few cheese slices on top of that. I put the top of the rolls on and I brushed them with a little bit of melted butter. I put them into the oven to bake at about 325 just to heat everything up and melt the cheese. With the leftover rolls that I had, I'm still going to use those, but maybe not for a few nights. So I went ahead and put them in a Ziploc bag and put them in the freezer. These turned out really good. They were just so flavorful and so simple to make, and definitely will go on my menu again at some point. And for my third chicken meal, this was a pretty simple one. I started out by making a pot of rice. I like to put a little oil and brown up my rice just a bit and coat it with the oil. I think it just makes it taste better. I threw in a little bit of chicken broth flavoring and some salt, and I let that simmer for about 20 minutes. At that point, I heated up my pan with some butter and softened up those onions in that butter, along with adding some flour to that, because I had planned to make the gravy from this. Once the flour had cooked a bit, I added, I think, about 3 cups of water and some chicken broth. You could also just use chicken broth, canned or whatever. That would work too, but I used the powder. I added in about a cup of frozen peas and carrots to that. And once it had gotten nice and thick and bubbly, I took the last of my chicken meat and I put that in there, stirred it up real good. By that time, my rice was done cooking and I set that aside. While I had been doing all that, I had also roasted up a pan of broccoli and cauliflower mix that I get from Costco. And so this meal was really easy and delicious. I just dished up the rice, put the chicken gravy over the top, and put a side of vegetables with it. And yum, this was a good one. This is a traditional one. We have this often, and we ate that for 2 nights. Now it was time to start with the hamburger meals. I cooked up 3 pounds of hamburger because it had been in my freezer for a while. And to that, I added 1 large onion and a few sweet peppers that I had chopped all up. I cooked that until the hamburger was done. I had already drained the grease from that and let that cook. I added extra seasonings to that because I wanted my meat to be nicely seasoned. Once everything was all cooked, I divided that into 3 different containers. And you can put the extra hamburger into the freezer if you want, just like with the chicken meals, and then it's there to make any of these meals at any point if you don't make them one right after the other. Now I took the leftover rice that I had from the chicken gravy over rice. I added 1/3 of that hamburger, some frozen corn, kind of stirred that all up, added a nice heaping cup of salsa to that. And then I added some grated cheese. Once that was all mixed up, it was time to put it into my little 8x8 casserole dish. I topped it with the last of the cheese that I had in that bag and put it in the oven. I baked that at 350 until everything was hot and bubbly, probably about 35 minutes or so. And there you have it. This also was really good, and it's one that I have made many times. I served that with some tortilla chips and a salad on the side. Now, spaghetti is a meal that I think we all know how to make, but I'll just run through what I did. I had a quart of my own home canned spaghetti sauce I was using for this. I had an open bag of spaghetti noodles that I wanted to kind of use some of those up. I knew I wouldn't use them all. Roasted carrots were going to be on the side, and I had those dinner rolls that I had pulled out of the freezer because we were going to have the dinner rolls alongside the spaghetti dinner. I started by cooking about 6 to 8 ounces of spaghetti noodles. In my pot, I added some extra mushrooms because we love mushrooms in our spaghetti. I let those soften up, and about that point, my spaghetti was done, so I drained that. I added my sauce to my pot of mushrooms there, and that was my other jar of hamburger, or other container of hamburger, I should say. And I stirred that up. I added some extra garlic and herb spices, because we like that, and then I added in those noodles. There you go. That made a super fast, super quick dinner, especially since I already had the hamburger made. And I also, while I was doing all that, I had roasted my carrots. And so there you go. We had spaghetti, dinner rolls, and roasted carrots that night, and it was delicious. We ate that meal for 2 nights as well. For this last and third pound of hamburger, I'm actually only going to use half of it. I am going to stretch these sloppy joes out with a jar of my home canned black beans. This recipe does call for 4 tablespoons of tomato paste, which I took out of the freezer. Those are the little white crystals you see. I freeze my tomato paste from the can. I had a package of hamburger buns in the freezer that just had 2 of them in there, so that was going to work out perfect for tonight. So I took half of my hamburger and put that in my frying pan to get that warmed up. I put the rest of that back into the refrigerator to use another time. I drained and rinsed one jar of my own canned beans. You could use regular canned beans from the grocery store. And I added the rest of the ingredients. I ended up heating all that up, mixing it up, and until it was, kind of thick. I did add a little bit of extra water at the end because it was just a little bit too thick. And while that was happening, I roasted some green beans to go with that. So there you go. Very good. We had it for 1 night plus lunch the next day. I really love one-pot meals. They go together so well, and that's what this is. I used the other half of the hamburger, a jar of my own home-canned pinto beans for this. I had what was left in a bag of bow tie pasta that I wanted to finish off, but I knew that wasn't going to be enough, so I also pulled out a bag of rotini. And it's okay if my pastas don't look the same. They still taste delicious. I tend to weigh out my pasta so that I don't end up with too much. I used up the last of those green beans. I wanted to add some more mushrooms. I had some better than bouillon to add to that. I had a half of container of, or a little bit less, of sour cream that was going to go into this. And some cheddar cheese. To begin with, for this meal, I just heated up a little bit of oil and added some of those sliced up mushrooms to that and weighed out my pasta. I wanted about 8 ounces of pasta. Once the mushrooms were soft, I added in that half a pound of hamburger, my drained and rinsed beans, and I chopped up those green beans and added those along with some water and some better than bouillon. You could use beef bouillon if you want. I just like chicken. It's a personal preference. I let all that come to a boil, and then I added in my pasta. Now, I had put 2 cups of water in there, and I ended up adding a 3rd cup because I wanted to make sure that my pasta was submerged so that it would get nicely cooked. Once that had come to a boil, I put the lid on, turned the heat down, and let that simmer for about 15 minutes until all the liquid, or most of the liquid, had been absorbed. At that point, I went ahead and added my sour cream and stirred that in real well, and I added about, I would say, a nice generous cup of cheddar cheese. I put the lid on the pot at that point so that the cheese could melt. I had the burner turned off, and there was our dinner. I had a half of a baguette in my freezer, and I pulled that out and stuck it under the broiler with a little bit of butter to add to this, and I made a salad. This was delicious, and we ate this for 2 nights. There you go, guys. Now you can see how I put together these 7 meals that lasted us for 12 dinners. These really lasted us quite a while. If you're feeding more people than 2, which is just typical for my husband and I, you might need to double some of these types of recipes, but you get the idea. And like I said at the beginning, I hope it inspires you to be able to utilize up your resources in your pantry and your freezer and get some creative, frugal cooking done. All right, you guys, thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye-bye.